Welcome back to the booth here at Mythic Championship, #1 Cleveland. My name's Riley Knight, joined by Paul Cheon. And Paul, things are heating up as we head towards our top 8. Later on this evening, we will, of course, be announcing the top 8 for the Mythic Championship. And tomorrow, in all its glory, it'll be streamed live. But hey, we got to get there first. We saw the players in contention. They're in the feature match area right now. Let's get down there and see how things pan out for round number 14 of the Mythic Championship, #1 here in Cleveland. Focus up, nerds. It's time for round number 14 here at Mythic Championship #1. We're live from Cleveland, Ohio in the United States of America, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to coverage of this next match between Reid Duke and Michael Bonde. We've checked in with both these players extensively throughout the weekend. Reid Duke on Mono Blue Tempo. Michael Bonde out of Denmark. He is on Simic Nexus. Paul, your thoughts on this matchup as the players kick things off and get underway?
I think this matchup has to favor the mono blue deck. You're playing a deck that already has access to 4 main deck counterspells and Wizard's Retort, and also 3 copies of Spell Pierce. And Spell Pierce very, very effective at countering Nexus of Fate, a nice hefty 7-mana spell. Reid Duke, this is kind of the reason to bring this mono blue deck into this tournament, because if you are looking to play slightly slower matchups and you're also playing against a deck with really no removal, having access to this draw that you're seeing from Reid Duke,
I mean, look at this.
Mythical Character Curious Obsession is extremely strong. And actually, Michael has 3 interactive spells in blink of an eye and happened to have it there.
Yeah, I mean, that was just maximum velocity here for Reid Duke. He was out of the gates like a greyhound there. And luckily, Bonde had a way to stem the bleeding, because blink of an eye was a critical play there in order to cool Duke's heels there, because evasive 1-drop into Curious Obsession, that's how games end very quickly.
Right. But even when that happens, like oftentimes it already did the damage, right? Because you cast the Curious Obsession, you drew the card, and Michael also just didn't kill the creature. So the creature will come back. So Reid is still up a card in that entire exchange. But of course, Reid would much rather prefer that he had the Curious Obsession in play.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Keep it on that Miscloaked Herald. Get ready to smash him up. That's the way that Duke in this deck wins these games. Bonde, however, with a Search for Azcanta, is also playing the kind of game that he's wanting to play as well, in the sense that he is slowing down his opponent, he's setting up his engine cards with Search for Azcanta, and he's buffering his life total as best he's able. He's still taking 3 a turn. That's still a fair margin, and with this Miscloaked Herald coming back down, that number's only going to go up.
Right, and Reid actually had the option there of casting a Wizard's Retort on the Search for Azcanta, but that Search for Azcanta is nowhere close to flipping.
Oh, no.
And really, you really want to be saving the counter magic for either a Key of Root Snare or a Nexus of Fate. And that'll, again, the fact that Reid is basically kind of quote-unquote pre-boarded for this specific type of matchup is going to make things very difficult for Michael.
And you can see that Bonde is really having to think long and hard about his plays here. Duke is sitting there cool as a cucumber behind his wall of counter magic, ready to get it done. And Bonde, he can't tap out for anything. He can't cast the Wilderness Reclamation that's in his hand. He can look to, fire off maybe a Chemist's Insight or something like that at instant speed. But, Bonde is not in a position to play the game he wants to play, because Duke has this classic 1-2 combo of pressure and disruption.
Right, and that's kind of how you saw Michael lose to Marcio Carvalho in Game 3 of their matchup. Marcio had creatures on the board, and then all he needed was that the Spell Pierce and the Negate to really close out the game. And this game is going to play out in a very similar fashion.
Duke now getting ready to rumble, and rumble he does. He's going to commit further to the board with a Terramander here. Not so much letting the cat out of the bag so much as letting the flying frog lizard salamander drake out the bag here. And a Chemist's Insight we mentioned before for Bonde, drawing him 2 cards. But, Duke has all the tools he needs. He can let that resolve. He knows that Bonde is a little constrained on mana. He knows that Root Snare isn't going to get the job done in the face of Duke's counter magic. And I think Duke is just that far ahead here that Bonde is going to need a miracle to get across the line.
Duke currently has Bonde on a 2-turn clock here. He's got 5 power worth of creatures, and when you were kind of looking at these creatures in the past couple of rounds against aggressive creature decks, they kind of looked a little silly. They were a little outclassed. But when you're playing against a deck with no creatures, all of a sudden, you know, these points of damage add up.
We talked about the fact that Mono Blue doesn't play very well from behind, and in this matchup, it's very unlikely to find itself in that position. And that means, Paul, that Mono Blue is always playing from the seat from which it wants to play.
Absolutely.
It wants to be proactive. It wants to be putting its pedal to the metal and getting it done, cracking some skulls. And again, another blink of an eye, it's just a stopgap. It's not going to solve the overall problem here for Bonde.
I actually think I kind of like using a dive down here because he already has a Wizard's Retort. Because by using the dive down, this still puts Michael on a 2-turn clock. So now Michael will take 5, and then he'll go to 5, and the next turn he needs to have a Root Snare to actually stay alive.
And as you can see in his hand, he doesn't have any technology of the sort there. Blink of an eye just having been deployed, only leaving him with a Growth Spiral, Nexus of Fate, Wilderness Reclamation, Opt. And these are not the tools that this man needs for this particular job. Here is a Growth Spiral, one of my favorite cards to come out of RNA. Thank you so much for that one, Paul. And thank you to Seb McKinnon. Some of the best Magic art I have ever seen. I love this card.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not
we had a pretty good feeling this was going to create a few new decks.
Oh, mate, I'm in love with this card, but it's not doing what Bonde wants him to do, right here and right now. Because, I mean, yeah, sure, burning through your deck, finding those extra cards, that's fine. But Bonde really needs a way to start to stem this bleed. Not even stem this bleed. He needs to trunk this bleed.
Right. And the only thing he can really do here to kind of stay alive is run out a Wilderness Reclamation and float mana, tap, and then cast a Nexus of Fate to try to get another turn. And all Reid needs to do is play the Wizard's Retort.
Just one counterspell, bro.
Just one counterspell.
Just one counterspell, bro. That's it. That's it, and that's all. And here is an Opt now. It looks like this is in response to the search for Azcanta trigger, meaning that it looks like Bonde is wanting to flip that search this turn.
Right, but Reid really has a sight set on only countering a very small, specific subset of cards that Michael could have.
All right, let's see what's up now for Bonde, and if he can find what he needs. He cannot. Flips the search for Azcanta, although I guess it was probably going in the graveyard regardless of what it was after that. And now, with the search for Azcanta active, Bonde can draw, but he's fighting a losing battle. Duke in hand for him, as you can see. Essence Capture, Wizard's Retort, Op Dive down, and that Retort is going to be all he needs to put the nail into this particular coffin.
Right. So Michael now, in order to even be able to cast the Nexus of Fate, has to run out the Wilderness Reclamation. And it'll be interesting to see if Reid chooses to use the Wizard's Retort there, because if he counters that, Michael could still be holding a Root Snare for the following turn.
Right, or Bonde could have some form of counter magic of his own to defend his Wilderness Reclamation. So does Duke instead, you're saying, save the counterspell for the Nexus of Fate?
Right, that is an option.
All right, well, let's see this is fascinating here. Here is the Wilderness Reclamation. Is Duke going to rise to this bait? I mean, it's going to serve him well if he does. Yes, indeed he does. Bonde is left defenseless here. Looks like he's going to do his best to try to keep his snoot above water, but he's going to go down to 2 life after that blink of an eye is fired off.
He does buy himself an extra turn here. This is not lethal. Reid Duke does not have enough spells in his graveyard to adapt the Terramander, so this will be an attack for 3. So Michael might have a chance here.
He might. I mean, it's a very slim one if it's there at all. You can see Duke's hand. Dive down, Op, Merfolk Trickster, Essence Capture, and Island. So nothing like a Curious Obsession. I mean, double Curious Obsession to do it.
Yeah, the thing is, he's actually 1 spell short in his graveyard because he has the land.
Oh, no.
He needs 1 more spell in his graveyard to be able to adapt the Terramander. I wonder if he's like wondering if at any point he could have cast a dive down on one of his creatures just to increase the number of spells in his graveyard, so that this situation might have happened.
Well, as it happens, he gets in now for 3. He goes and gets a nice little lunch at the Michael Bonde Bistro there, and he's down to 2 life. Let's see what the next move is now from Bonde. In hand for him, Chemist's Insight, Nexus of Fate, and a Root Snare off the top. Hello. Can Bonde get himself across the line here after this? I mean, he is hanging. He's digging his fingernails into that cliff wall, Paul. Can he hold on?
Yeah, it's really close. But the thing is, you know, Bonde has to string together multiple cards. He does have that flip search for Azcanta. I imagine there's going to be a Root Snare that's going to be cast during Reid Duke's upkeep to make it less likely for him to draw something like a Wizard's Retort.
Here's an Opt now for Duke. Has a look at the top card. Let's see if he likes the look of it. He does not. It goes below deck, so a freshie now for the American.
Yeah, Reid really is just looking for 1 specific card here in Wizard's Retort.
Well, let's see what what he can pull together now in the upkeep.
Yeah, this is an upkeep root snare.
Root snare. Did Duke find an answer for it? Has our MPL player got the goods to push through lethal this turn, or is this root snare going to stymie his plans? Looks like it is. It's going to resolve, so no attacks this turn from Duke. He can commit further to the board with a Merfolk Trickster, although there's no need to do that. His entire hand can be played at instant speed, so he may as well just wait it out. And we'll see now an activation of search, as Counter the Sun. The search is over. The search is complete.
So now he's just looking for card draw, more root snares, or even a Wilderness Reclamation. Wilderness Reclamation will really get the ball rolling for Michael.
All right. Bonde ships a card below decks with an opt. And back to him now as he draws for the turn. Can he find what he needs?
If he doesn't, he might just need to fire off a Nexus of Fate just for a draw step, which is not really ideal.
Just the old explore
But if you have
mode.
nothing, I mean, the thing is, Reid actually has to be feeling good about this because this tells him that Michael doesn't have anything, and he just needs to do this to try to draw into more fog effects in Root Snare or just additional Nexus of Fates.
I mean, this is the downside of Time Walk effects. They don't do anything unless you've got a pot on the boil, you know? Like, and especially at 7 mana, you know, we've seen Time Walk effects in the past, and you've got to have a clock on. You've got to have a value engine, a planeswalker, just something to do with that time. Here, this is just a very expensive explore.
Yeah, that's the thing. We've seen banned versions of this where you do have the additional card draw in effect like Teferi. For this specific deck, Wilderness Reclamation kind of acts as that planeswalker,
yeah, that's right?
Because you have access to so much mana, you can afford to tap out, play Nexus of Fate, and activate your Search for Azcanta or cast Chemist's Insight.
All right, we're just chaining him here. We're just chaining him au natural off the top. Bonde lines himself up another extra turn here. So Reid Duke can spend some time, maybe clip his nails or think about what he's going to have for dinner.
Yeah, but drawing those in back-to-back turn doesn't really...
doesn't get you anywhere.
Doesn't do anything.
No, that's it. The wheels are just spinning in the mud there.
Yeah, Nexus is not really a card that Michael's looking for right now. He really wants... I think Wilderness Reclamation. If you find a Wilderness Reclamation, then you can activate Search for Azcanta, and then you can have 2 cards you can draw once you untap, right? You can draw the Root Snare, or you can just draw the Nexus of Fate. And so that is the important card for him.
And that's what we're talking about when we talk about engines. We need something like Search for Azcanta being activated multiple times a turn. There's a Root Snare off the top. It's going to be the only card that Bonde can take, and take it he does. 3 lands, ship below decks. That's a great pickup for the Dane here. He's got that Chemist's Insight in hand as well. But Duke doesn't have too much to say about things. Only a Merfolk Trickster and some interaction in hand for him, none of which is going to be particularly relevant against the non-creature Onslaught. I have to say, Bonde has put on a very impressive performance here, Paul.
Right, and now as just the game goes on and on, this is close. So, so I was actually wondering if he was going to play out that Search for Azcanta there, because if he does, he loses the Spell Pierce.
He's dead to Spell Pierce.
Right.
Yep.
So he cannot afford, he doesn't want to afford that, and he just wants to basically just cast the Root Snare here and not leave himself vulnerable to Spell Pierce, because that is a deck that's commonly played as a 2 or 3 of in this mono blue tempo deck.
So very, very wisely indeed, choosing to play around that. Here is a Sinister Sabotage to remove that Terramander.
This is just to dig. This is just to dig.
Yep. He doesn't. I mean, he doesn't care about how many more creatures Reid Duke has. It doesn't matter if Reid Duke has 1 or 1,000,000 creatures on the battlefield. Bonde will win or lose regardless.
He kept
on top.
It felt like a Nexus of Fate, but I'm not sure.
What
Maybe
is
it could have been a Root Snare too.
Off the top, it's obviously going to be something pretty special. I think you're right in saying it's a Nexus of Fate. So this is Nexus of Fate number 3 now. Of course, they do get shuffled back into the library.
And it makes sense to top this because he also has that Search for Azcanta in hand. So he is actually able to, you know, do something with his mana this time instead of
the
just
tiniest bit of value.
Right, exactly. Because the Search for Azcanta, I know he's already got one flipped, but it still has value. The second search that you play still allows you to scry or scry every single turn, basically.
And that's what Bonde is wanting to do. He is wanting to rip through that deck, burn through that deck at the highest velocity he can, and find the cards that he needs. And right now, I think that the card right at the top of his list, Paul, is Wilderness Reclamation.
Oh, absolutely. He's only got 3 left in his deck, as Reid Duke did counter the first one.
Back to Bonde now. An extra turn for him as he ships an island into the bin. Of course, Search for Azcanta, a May ability.
All right, so he does need to find something here. He needs a Root Snare.
Off the top, 1, 2, 3, and 4 cards. A Chemist's Insight gives him 1 more bite, or 2 more bites at this ever-diminishing cherry.
Right, but I don't even know if he has a land in hand. I think it might need to be exactly land root snare.
Land, root snare, ghoul. He found half of it, but did not find the whole thing. And Reid Duke has to get through a very sticky wicket there. I tell you what, Bonde really made him sweat, but ultimately, Mr. Magic Reid Duke gets himself across the line. And well, look, I have to give it to Michael Bonde for really not giving up and digging in there. But ultimately, we talked about the pressure and disruption package of Mono Blue, and that was enough to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. Truly, you know, people talk about the power of Nexus of Fate and what it's been doing, but I think truly the power of this deck comes from Wilderness Reclamation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the card that is really at the top of the list here. Anyway, my friends, we are going to take a quick break. We've got more Magic to show you after that, of course, live from the Mythic Championship 1 in Cleveland. So stick with us. We'll be back live after this. And it's a warm welcome back to our feature match area here at Mythic Championship 1 in Cleveland. My name's Ronnie Knight, joined by Paul Cheon from Wizards R&D. And while our first table of Duke and Bonde are underway, we are now going to have a quick live look in on Marcio Carvalho and Yoshihiko Ikikawa as they're getting underway as well. Marcio Carvalho is on white-blue, mono-white with a splash of blue aggro. And Yoshihiko Ikikawa on Esper Control here, Paul. Looks like we've actually got we've got it in we've got a large print version, Paul. And for those who enjoy watching a smaller screen when they prefer to consume their Magic content, hey, look, we cater for all tastes here,
right?
On team coverage. Now you can see that Duke and Bonde shuffling up, getting ready for game number 2. Marcio Carvalho off to the races very swiftly indeed, flipping that Legion's landing nice and early. And Ikawa is going to be hard-pressed. He's going to need to find answers immediately to stop this onslaught.
Right. Flipping the Legion's landing is one of the most important things for this matchup, as the Esper deck really doesn't have an answer, really, in terms of actually being able to deal with it. You know, Field of Ruin is not really very commonly played anymore.
Which baffles me.
Right.
I was thinking this before.
It's hard to cast Absorb with Field of Ruin.
But no, just generally. You know what I want to play? I want to play Crucible of Worlds, Wayward Swordtooth, and Field of Ruin, right? And Wilderness Reclamation, so I can activate 2 a turn.
Right.
So watch out. That's going to be the scourge of MTG Arena in a couple of weeks, ladies and gentlemen, after I break the format over my knee with that little brewski. But right now, Carvalho on a more traditional bent with a history of Benalia, powering out a Knight token here. And Ikawa, I mean, what's he looking for here? He needs a Kaya's Wrath. He needs but Mortify.
There's such a diversity in terms of permanent types that Marcio has in the battlefield. It is really, really rough. If he has a Kaya's Wrath, Marcio just returned Dauntless Bodyguard from the graveyard, so if he does use Kaya's Breath, he can actually just protect that Knight token.
Oh, yeah.
If Yoshihiko has a Vraska's Contempt, well, there's still pressure coming at you from History of Benalia and the other creatures that are on the battlefield, and Marcio has that Adanto in play as well.
So Carvalho really firing on all cylinders when it comes to this control matchup, and we'll see if Ikawa has what he needs to get across the line or even just keep himself in this game. But it's a rough start here for the Japanese player because, as you can see, Carvalho getting busy. He's really whittling away that life total of Ikawa's.
So Yoshihiko really needs a sweeper here. If he has a sweeper here, he's in pretty good shape.
How
that is also...
Can I interest you, Paul? Can I interest you in one Lyra Dawnbringer?
Oh, look at this! But Marcio had Conclave Tribunal, so he just had a lethal attack with the Tribunal. So Marcio with basically the perfect draw here, because look at Yoshihiko's draw, right? He had turn 3, Cry at the Carnarium, turn 4, Vraska's Contempt, turn 5, Lyra, and lost.
Still wasn't enough. Still wasn't enough for the control player there, so Carvalho, once again, pulling himself across the line at a great rate of knots, it has to be said, as we welcome you back to the booth. My name's Riley Knight. This guy's Paul Cheon. And I think one thing that we can kind of dial down on here a little bit, Paul, although we didn't see it in that game, is the addition of blue to these mono white lists. We've seen mono white with red for heroic reinforcements. That was very much the deck du jour at the last Mythic Championship that was held towards the closing stages of last year. But Azorius entering the format with Ravnica Allegiance means we've had not only Hallowed Fountain, but cards like Deputy of Detention. Bring in grandfathered copies of Negates and Spell Pierce, and all of a sudden there's a very healthy interactive suite coming out of this otherwise very aggressive deck.
Right, because this deck is even more dangerous, right? Because it puts much more pressure much quicker than something like the mono blue deck that we saw from Reid Duke's deck. So if you just go curve, 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 holding up negate, that's often just going to be enough to beat a lot of these control decks.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to see that throughout the weekend here, the role of blue in a deck like Marcio Carvalho's. But right now, it's all blue, all day, every day with Reid Duke. He tweeted earlier about the fact that this is the first time, I think it's the first time he's ever at a Mythic Championship, he has registered 0 non-blue cards in both limited and constructed.
Wow.
Which is a real achievement, I have to say. And right now, he's getting it done with Mist-Cloaked Herald. That's a great start for Duke. We'll see what Bonde's up to as well on his first turn or second turn. Druid of the Cowl. That's one way to both hold down the ground against aggressive decks and also buffer that little mana ramp there.
Yeah, so this is part of the creature package that this deck has in the sideboard. It's got multiple Incubation Druids, Druid of the Cowl, Atsuken Archer, and Biogenic Ooze. So I think this is kind of the approach that the Simic Nexus deck needs to take in order to actually have a shot in this matchup. Because Reid is just going to bring in more counter magic out of the sideboard, right? If Michael wanted a chance, probably was game 1 if he wants to execute from a similar access. However, if he does go into this kind of blue-green ramp creature strategy, he might have a better chance because the Archer is a fantastic card in this matchup. On top of that, he's got cards like Crushing Canopy to deal with things like the Tempest Djinn. It's possible that Michael just goes into a fully transformative plan where he doesn't even necessarily rely on Nexus of Fate and plays more like a blue-green mid-range
deck. That's exactly right. And then, ooh, can you smell that? Oh, it's Reid Duke's hand. What a stinker. Look at this. He's got a single Tempest Djinn, a Wizard's Retort, which is pretty awkward to cast right now as he's tapping out for the Djinn. And as we've said, Bonde has cards like Crushing Canopy in his list. He's got this more creature-based package here. And a blink of an eye with the kicker as well is a great way for Bonde to flip the script and start to play a tempo game with Reid Duke.
Right. And the thing is, Reid is in an interesting spot because he's not really sure how he's supposed to be sideboarding in this matchup. Does he want to just bring in a bunch of counter magic, or does he want to keep cards like Essence Capture in? If you expect your opponent to be bringing in Incubation Druids, Atsuken Archers, and Biogenic Oozes, you might actually be more inclined to keep some ways to deal with creatures. For example, he might actually have chosen to bring in something like Entrancing Melody for this matchup.
Bonde here has bought himself a ton of time with that blink of an eye, but Duke is right back at you on the battlefield with a Tempest Djinn that we saw already, and now a Terramander freshly drawn last turn. But Bonde looks like he's got he's going to go as big as he can here with this Hydroid Krasis. It's being cast for 4 here, Paul. Gain 2, draw 2.
Yeah, so the coast is clear, so Michael was able to resolve this. This will likely trade with the Tempest Djinn that's on the battlefield.
But hey, that's fine, right?
Right, you got your value there. But Reid's also looking okay. I mean, it depends on what the rest of Michael's hand is. But, I mean, you know, like this Tempest can do a lot of work. And if he did keep something like Dive Down, for example, you know, he can use it to defeat the Hydroid Krasis in combat. He can also choose to play it a little more patient and, for example, not attack with the Tempest Djinn.
No,
never mind.
All offense, no defense. Reid Duke, get in there, crack some skulls, and we see Bonde snap off the block at the speed of light. His hand actually does look pretty good here. Atsakan Archer to kill one of those X1s. I mean, it looks good in an aesthetic sense because it has 2 copies of Growth Spiral, the greatest Magic card ever printed. Thank you, Seb McKinnon, for the gift you gave humanity. And Nexus of Fate as well, as he bridges towards the late game.
Right, and now there's these Terramanders that are in play, but they're very far away from being adapted. Reid Duke does have 5 lands in play, but no spells currently in the graveyard.
All right, so we'll see what Bonde's next move is. I think it's going to be this Atsakan Archer. Pew pew, look at this. It's Horizon Zero Dawn, and away goes one of these X1s. Which one is he going to go after here?
I mean, I think Reid might just be looking to counter this because this really does kind of just kind of slow down Reid a bunch. And Reid really wants to put instants in his graveyard too because of those Terramanders in play, so he's really he really wants to have spells in his graveyard to be able to adapt the Terramanders that are in play.
So it's a Growth Spiral here from Michael Bonde now. After that, Atsakan Archer does eat a Wizard's Retort. Draws, puts a Breeding Pool into play. And there's a second copy of Growth Spiral in hand for Bonde, but I mean, it could seem firing it off here. I don't think it's, you know, that Druid of the Cowl isn't doing a lot of blocking. So we'll see.
Yeah, it is basically just additional Growth Spirals. But given that the Mono Blue deck has very little removal, it's actually, you know, these mana creatures are very strong if you don't play against decks that have access to ways to kill them. But after sideboard, especially against the blue deck, these are very, very good options to kind of give yourself maybe the speed necessary to keep up with this blue deck.
Uh-oh, look at this. Reid Duke now, Curious Obsession on a Mistcloaked Herald, a play as old as time. Well, no, it's about what?
Few months?
Few months old?
Few months,
maybe about a year? I don't know. A play as old as time itself, ladies and gentlemen. And, of course, it will be around until the heat death of the universe. In they come. And Bonde firing off a Growth Spiral. I don't know what he's expecting to hit here. Maybe he just wants that sweet auto-pass value. Very, very important to get that when you can. But Duke now does have a Spell Pierce to remove that Growth Spiral from contention. Bonde down to 9, Duke on 19. All cylinders, all systems are go here for Reid Duke, but a Wilderness Reclamation for Michael Bonde and a Nexus of Fate in hand. Reid Duke is hell-bent. Is this the beginning of a beautiful friendship?
Well, Michael does have a Memorial to Genius in play, but still does want to find additional ways to draw cards. And, you know, if you see the archers that came in out of the sideboard, I mean, something has had to have given, right? If you look at the configuration, most of the deck is just card draw. So I'm really curious what Michael's sideboard plan was. And, you know, for example, did he choose to shave on some number of Chemist's Insight to be able to fit a few more of these interactive spells?
So, 4 mana floating, and after the Wilderness Reclamation trigger has resolved, Bonde is now in a position to fire off that Nexus of Fate, and unfortunately is not going to be able to crack that Memorial to Genius just yet. Oh no, he can. No, of course he can because of the Druid. Excuse me.
He does have the Druid of the Cowl.
He does have the Druid of the Cowl.
So he now has 3 new cards to look at.
It's pretty good. That's pretty good. And the reason, of course, that he's casting that Nexus beforehand, I would imagine, is that he is very much hoping that he redraws it with one of those 3 cards. You can see a judge shuffling the deck at the end there. And ultimately, Bonde does fire off that Memorial to Genius. And look at this, a nice full grip here for the Dane. So let's see what he can do in this next turn now that his Reclamation is online. Oh, an attack. I love it. I love it.
I was like, that's a Nexus of Fate.
That's a Nexus of Fate. All offense, no defense. Get it done, Michael Bonde.
So Michael really needs to find ways to draw cards. Otherwise, as we saw in Game 1, they don't do a whole lot if you're not abusing it in some other way. You need to be casting Nexus of Fate plus something on top of that to really just fully unlock the card.
This is where you need, you know, the as countered, the Sunken Ruin. This is where you need something like, you need to find something like a Hydroid Krasis.
Hydroid Krasis
cycling
would be fantastic
through your
here.
deck with Chemist's Insight. So let's see what Bonde can cook up here. Chef Bonde finds a biogenic
that
ooze.
is huge.
That is a massive massive card here. This card has only been going up and up and up this weekend, and you can see how many Ooze tokens Bonde has brought to this party. Let's not forget, Paul, that every trigger from the Wilderness Reclamation represents so many Oozes.
However, I think Michael might just be dead on board here.
No way.
Right? We have... None of these creatures can block.
Right.
Reid has 5 power in play.
Right.
If he adapts a Pteramander, that's just 9 damage.
Is he just dead?
Right. He's got 2 spells in his graveyard, right? Is that a...
So
that's a Wizard's Retort and a Spell Pierce with 6 lands in play. So all Reid needs to do is just untap, adapt, and attack for lethal, assuming Michael does not have a Root Snare or something like that in hand.
He does have Root Snare in hand.
Oh,
He's got a Root Snare in hand. So this is a decisive draw step for Reid Duke. If he can find a Wizard's Retort to deal with this Root Snare, then it's going to be all over Red Rover. But otherwise, Michael Bonde is threatening to take over this game in no short order.
Wait,
thanks to this biogenic
Did he
ooze.
tap out, though? Does he not have a green mana open
No,
here?
no. He's left at least 1 land untapped.
He's left 1 land untapped,
Oh,
but
no.
it's really important to have left 2
Oh,
land
no.
untapped.
Michael Bonde has just served this game up to Reid Duke on a silver platter.
He needed an extra green mana up, right?
He needs green mana, unless there is something we've missed here, Paul. Reid Duke can just get in for the win, adapted Pteramander, and Michael Bonde has just said, my lord, would you like to sup upon a match win here and now?
That's exactly enough.
After all this setup, he's just handed the game away, and unfortunately, Michael Bonde there, a very regretful moment for him, but Reid Duke keeping his cool, playing until the final whistle, and getting across the line after Bonde. As you can see, he's just kicking himself after that.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much on the line right now. You know, you're kind of fighting and clawing back. You find the perfect card. You're excited. You put a bunch of oozes on the battlefield.
I know.
It didn't, you know, and it was you just 1 mana off there.
Just one mana off. I mean, he did all this work. He
needed
set up.
Right. He needed to make 1 less ooze there, play that Root Snare, untap, maybe, and even then it might not have been enough. He still probably needed to draw, because I don't think the oozes were lethal. He probably still needed to draw either an Nexus of Fate or a Root Snare to be able to attack, to survive the following turn.
A really unfortunate misstep there for Michael Bonde, and you know that that's going to weigh heavy on his heart as we head towards our top 8. But the good news for the Dane is that he is not out of the conversation yet. At X and 3, there is still a chance if he can stitch together a couple more wins in the coming rounds. However, that one's in the books, my friends. That one's in the rear view, and it's time to move on to bigger and better things with Marcio Carvalho and Yoshihiko Ikawa. Marcio Carvalho, the Portuguese superstar, one of the greatest limited players on the face of the earth, and a member of the Magic Pro League, of course. At 12-1, he is leading the field. Yoshihiko Ikawa on 11-2 on Esper Control. Looks like they've split the games 1 and 2, so it's all going to come down to how things turn out.
This is not a card that I would have expected Yoshihiko to have after sideboard.
All right.
You're playing a deck with Cry of the Carnarium and Kaya's Wrath. So this is a Thief of Sanity on turn 3 on the play. So maybe Yoshihiko identified that on the play, he wants to play Thief of Sanity and just be a little more aggressive, a little more proactive.
All offense, no defense. That is the tagline for Mythic Championship #1. Here's a second Thief of Sanity. And maybe this one is going to do some work here in the face of what Carvalho's cooking. But hey, Carvalho's off to a pretty good start.
Absolutely.
Double
and
Tithe Taker.
He's currently sitting at, looks like 8 permanents. So if you can get 2 more on the battlefield, he will be ascended. And the Snubhorn Sentry will then become a 3/3, so he's counting his permanents here.
And look at this as well. Now we've got an Ajani, and that's going to be a big headache for Ikawa. We talked about the diversity of threats and how that is a really good way to contest control decks, having creature threats, planeswalker threats, artifact threats, enchantment threats, whatever you can pull together. And Ikawa now in a position where he's all of a sudden under a huge amount of pressure from 2 different axes.
Right, and the Thief can't even block. This is more like, hey, I'm on the play. I'm going to be playing a 3-mana card that basically lets me draw a card every turn.
Yeah.
That's kind of what he's playing this for. But I mean, things are getting kind of rough. I mean, he can find some 1-drops here to block with, but he has to deal with that Ajani that's on the battlefield too. And he did miss land drop number 4.
Double Glacial Fortress in addition to a Banalish Marshal, the pickup here for Ikawa. That's not what he wants to see, although I guess it turns his Windrake into a 3-mana 3/3 flyer. Is that one of them?
Right. Although that's not going to really get it done against the Ajani. And he's got a couple of cast downs in play, but things are really looking rough. And if he wants to cast one of the cast downs in his hand, he needs to do it on his turn because there are 2 tithe takers on the battlefield.
So it costs 4. Yep, and he's going to do that here. Snubhorn Sentry is cast down, and it's back now to Carvalho, who is really pulling further and further ahead. Another snubbo off the top here for him. And I think if he plays it, will come into play as a 1-mana 3/3. Not a bad rate.
Nope.
Thanks, Paul.
Not bad at all.
Thanks, Paul. Putting 1-mana 3/3s back into standard.
Classic Mild Nacatls.
Yep. Yeah. Mild Nacatl. Dino Nacatl here. And now the tithe takers taking even more tithes, this time from Ajani. Bit of pocket money from them as they go up now to 4/3s.
Yeah,
Very mighty
and
indeed.
now Marcio's entire board is immune to Cry of the Carnarium if Yoshihiko somehow also had that in conjunction with the Thief of Sanity.
And now a Loxodon as well. And this is just going from bad to worse here for Ikawa. I think I have to agree with you, Paul. Thief of Sanity is not the card you want in this matchup post-board, and this means that Ikawa goes down 2-1. Carvalho cannot be contained. No brakes on the Carvalho train as he powers towards a Mythic Championship top 8 here. It wouldn't be his first, Paul. We'll just put it that way. This guy's Stone Cold Superstar from the European circuit.
And Marcio is now locked for the top 8.
Is that right?
As if he loses the next 2 rounds, he will still only have 3 losses. And no, there has never been a time where somebody with 3 losses has not made the top 8.
All right, well, that's the way that it goes for this round, my friends, and that's going to wrap up coverage of this round here. We are all out of matches for round number 14, but the good news is the party don't stop in round number 15 and 16 as we draw closer and closer to the top 8. You're going to be in the booth with Marshall and Paul for that. You're not going to want to miss a second, ladies and gentlemen. Right now, however, we've got to go to a break. Stick with us on the other side of this. We're back at the desk with Rich and Maria live here from Mythic Championship 1 in Cleveland.
Hello and welcome back to the news desk. Maria and Rich hanging out with you. A few results from the floor for you. Chi-Ching Ye is currently sitting at 11-3, as is Paul Rietzel, 11-3, and Luis Scott Vargas at 11-3. Autumn Burchett won again, 12-2. Somebody who is looking to potentially make, starting to dream about, his 4th Pro Tour top 8, fingers crossed, is with Brian David Marshall.
All right, I'm here with Reid Duke. Reid, 14 rounds in the books, 12-2. You've been in this position before. What do these last couple rounds look like for you here at Mythic Championship Cleveland?
Well, I'm in a great position, near the top of the standings, and potentially can make the top 8 without getting another win. So I'll be looking to either scrape one out to lock myself up, or maybe get an intentional draw. But yeah, it's always nerve-wracking until you actually get the final standings, because anything can happen. I've seen the strangest things, so just going to try to stay really, really focused and take it one round at a time and not count my chickens before they hatch.
Does it change at all for when you're in such a big field like this? We have a pretty large field. I think it was just shy of 500 players. Does that change your math at all?
Yeah, definitely. I've played much, smaller Pro Tours that were closer to like 300 players, and in those, even one time I made the top 8 with a 12-4 record. That's very unlikely to happen this time with a larger tournament, so I'll definitely need to pick up some more match points somewhere in the last 2 rounds.
So talk us a little bit through that last game. There was, we saw Michael put a card on the table and show you that. What was going on there?
Well, it's funny because we, sometimes we have a few minutes before the match starts. So before the match, Michael and I were talking about just the strangest things that happened to us over the tournament. And he said he had some crazy moments in the feature match area earlier where, he could have been dead to a certain attack and the opponent didn't make it, that kind of thing. But, and I said, well, yeah, these things need to happen if for the people to make it so deep in such a large tournament. But what happened on the final turn was Michael had Biogenic Ooze with Wilderness Reclamation, and he spent too much mana on the Biogenic Ooze, so he could not cast his Root Snare in hand, and then I was able to adapt my Terramander and attack for lethal. So, had he held up the Root Snare, he would have had 1 less Ooze or 1 less attacker, but 1 extra draw step to find something, so it would have been a different game.
I mean, it's so insane to me to watch stuff like that sometimes. I mean, and I watched this other match. I mean, what happens over the course of a game of Magic in terms of just all these decisions that happen and all these motions that you go through in terms of playing a game where something can be decided that way?
Well, Magic is a super, super complicated game, and I can't really stress enough the amount of physical and mental tax that a 16-round Pro Tour has on a person. And that's not even to mention the particular deck that Michael chose to bring, which is a deck that even when he has his very, very best draws, he has to do, mechanically do like hundreds and sometimes thousands of actions before he wins the game, because it's a really intricate deck. So, I've certainly had moments in Magic where I come up with a plan, or I decide what's important, and then I just don't execute it the way that I had planned. It's easy, even when you've done it 1,000 times, if you're doing so many mechanical actions, to just make one wrong, and sometimes, unfortunately, that can determine the outcome of the game.
Reid and I were involved in a Twitter thread earlier. Someone referred to Reid as like a friendly NPC in a game who helps guide you along your way. That is very incorrect. He is very friendly. He will help guide you along the way, but he is here to play. He's got 2 more rounds to go, and he's looking for another top 8 in his Mythic Championship career.
Thanks so much, BDM. Well, Rich, results have been pouring in. You've got some for us?
Right, so let's keep stock of this. Marcio Carvalho in 13-1. Luis Scott Vargas 11-3.
Yeah.
So if he wins his next round to go 12-3, then an intentional draw would be likely enough. And then he's only 2 match wins away from being back where he was at Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica in the final.
I mean, that's...
Trying to go one better.
One better, right? He came in second, and he's like, not good enough.
No mulligans to 4 this time
Yeah.
would be his hope. So he's 11-3, still in contention. Autumn Burchett is in the same position. Basically, if you've just listened to Reid, everything that's true there is true for Autumn. 12-2. They will sit down next round. Now, there's Marcio on 13-1. but there are only a few players at 12 and 2, so there's a very good chance 12 and 2s get paired down at 11 and 3. The 11 and 3s have to play to get to 12 wins. So it is not that likely that Autumn will be able to intentionally draw this round.
Okay.
But it is certain that even with a loss in round 15, exactly the same position as Reid, a loss, 12 and 3, then you get to see the pairings. A win there gets you in. Possibly a draw gets you in. So great shape for both Reid and Autumn Burchett, which would be wonderful. 11-3s. It seems like we've interviewed a lot of people who are who know. Sometimes it's the curse of the interview, and you never see them. They're 7 and 1, and then you look at them later, and then they're 9 and 7 or whatever. But it looks like Terry So is right in there at 11 and 3. Andrea Mengucci is 11 and 3. Julien Berthaud of Team Baguette, the French squad that features Jean-Emmanuel Deprat, of course, of the MPL. He's 11 and 3. Alex Mageton, who you chatted to in those shorts. Oh boy, are 11 and 3, and Daniel Grafensteiner as well, a Team Grand Prix champion from 2014. He is at 11 and 3.
So we've seen a lot of great decks at this tournament, but some of them have been flying a little bit under the radar, but are nonetheless equally as awesome. And we've got one coming up right now, Raph Levy and Simon Gertzen.